Hello, brother friends and sister friends. Welcome to the Heart Set Above podcast. I'm Ellen Radcliffe, a therapist and a believer, here to help you navigate faith, relationships, and life in a world so far from Eden. This podcast is a space where we'll explore topics that matter deeply. Things like grief, connection, identity, and practical faith, grounded in both therapeutic wisdom and biblical truth. Whether we're wrestling with the messy middle between love and righteousness or learning to communicate like Jesus, we'll do it together with hearts set on things above. So grab your coffee, settle in, and join me as we pursue deeper connection with God, ourselves, and others. Let's dive in. Well, hello, brother friends and sister friends. Welcome back to the Heart Set Above podcast. Ellen and Georgia here, trying to find a heart set above in a world so far from Eden. Today, we're going to talk about one of the most foundational therapeutic aspects that we were taught as therapists that we think every Christian needs to know about, and that is unconditional positive regard. I learned some stuff in grad school as I was being trained to become a therapist that helps in just, for sure, everyday living, certainly relationally, but especially in our lives as Christians. And so we're just taking like a bit of a hodgepodge bullet point list and sharing it with our listeners on things that therapists know that every Christian should know to live a healthier, happier life. I don't know. Is that how you would frame it, Georgia?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think throughout the course, I would have moments where I would really see, like, it's like the whole thing of like things being made in the image of God. Like, I really would see, like, oh, this is something that has been like deemed man-made, like a man-made therapeutic concept. But I can so see the character of God in it, and I can so see what it could
Totally.
teach me about living faithfully. And so yeah, I suppose we're kind of sharing those things today of like what has stood out to us from our training that also felt really applicable to living as disciples.
Yeah, that's such a better way to frame it, the way that you just said it, because you're right. So much of what I'll say good psychology is rooted in biblical principles for sure. Might have different terms, more earthly terms to describe it, but the principles are very biblical. And then I think so much of the junk that's in psychology you cannot find in the Bible, right? So I guess that's what we're doing. I mean, we really could have endless amounts of podcasts on this topic. What are biblical principles that show up in therapeutic contexts as well? That's an endless conversation, right? There's no end to that. But we're just taking maybe our highlights, our favorites, and sharing it with our listeners today. You know what came to my mind when you said that, though, was I remember in grad school learning that the number one kind of like, oh man, what is the word for intervention? The number one intervention to offer when someone is struggling with low self-worth or self-esteem or even anxiety, depression is, what did you learn about this? I mean, like, no, I'm not talking about big, esoteric, theoretical stuff. I'm
Right.
talking about like, what
Like
is a practical? Yeah.
a practical. Oh gosh, when people are really going through it. I mean, I don't know if I was given a practical. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if I was given one. What were you?
I appreciate that about my program, that like we learned about all the
Yeah.
theories and all this kind of stuff, right? I'm sure you did too. But I just remember this one time, this one moment in my class discussion and my professor was saying, hey, here's a practical. I think it was even in our textbook, honestly. And he said, if someone is struggling with low self-worth, low self-esteem, anxiety, depression, even, have them go serve in a food pantry or go serve someone else because, right, it takes the focus off of self. And when you navel gaze, when you focus on self too much, your world gets, weird and distorted and your thinking gets off. And fortunately, I had the benefit of going to a Christian organization for my grad program. So we got to kind of wrestle through our faith and our relationship with God in the context of psychology, which was so nice. But and we were talking about like, isn't that crazy that the Bible says that consider others better than yourself and, stop focusing on yourself, focus on God and others. And the two interventions they gave us was one, have them go serve, take the focus off of self. That gets lots of good brain chemistry stuff going, takes the focus off self, gives them perspective, but then also have them join a church community because it's a place to and this is like in a, secular textbook was
Wow.
saying, hey, go have someone join a church community because that's
Mm.
a community that's built in to love you, a positive community where you can feel seen, known, and loved, right? Like that is the number one reinforcer when someone is struggling with low self-esteem, anxiety, or depression. Send them to a church
Mhm.
and have them go serve someone else. Like, whoa, that
Wow.
is so much biblical foundation in that.
Yeah, exactly. That's so interesting. I feel like you're so lucky in your course being like in a Christian context because it's like you
Yeah.
had this like um yeah, access to these like concepts or access to like understanding therapy like truly from that lens, which I think is just so cool and I feel like has been like a bit of a limitation with my own studies. But I love that
Mm.
because it is like those two suggestions like they offer belonging, they offer like the practice of, as you said, like looking outward or like the practice of generosity. But they are like, they do tend to like build your self esteem because it just gives you something a little bit more relational and a little bit less insular, which is, I feel
Mhm.
like, the Bible is all about relationships and, connecting with others. And those two things are all about relationships and connecting with others.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, the community obviously can be found outside of church,
Yeah.
right? So a lot of my clients who are not Christians, I will offer, hey, you can go join a church community, right? But a lot of them are like, nah, that's not for me. So I'll say, hey, go join a knitting group or a bowling league or something to have some sense of community. But remember in my grad program, we just talked about the efficiency of joining a church community because it offers so much of what you need all in one place. A lot of times your church community is the avenue with which you serve other people, right? You go
Hmm.
serve in a food
Yeah.
pantry or, serve other people within the church. It's also the place for community. It's also the place where you gain perspective. So I guess those are the bullet points I'm thinking of, with this particular story that things that every Christian should know that therapists are taught is the importance of community. So, so important, right? Like in therapy, I would say that's the one of the most foundational things. I don't have the answers as a therapist, but I can help someone feel less alone in their pain. I can
Hmm.
help someone feel seen in their, difficulty. And I think community, right? Like I think the rise in therapy in our modern day and age is because there's so much less actual community in our modern world. There's a lot of online community, which I think helps to a point, right? Like I'm also someone who watches a TikTok video and feels like this, tired, stressed out mom on this TikTok video gets it
Hmm.
and gets what I'm going through. And it makes me feel a little bit seen. That's great. It's not the same as walking into a church or walking into your bowling league, walking into your therapist's office, having a tangible 3D in the flesh person know you, know what you're going through, be able to offer you their tone of voice and their facial
Hmm.
expressions of compassion, right? So I think, our modern world answers that need a tiny bit, but it's just a drop in the bucket for what we really need, this deep sense of community. So the importance of community and the importance of perspective, which, like we said, church can do that. Certainly serving others can do that. What comes to your mind that, things you've learned that every Christian should know?
I think one of the major things that I remember learning about on my course was the concept of unconditional positive regard, which is kind of a fancy term for agape love. Like it's kind of
Mhm.
that very much that that um it's a perspective. So, speaking psychologically or from a psychotherapeutic point of view, to define it, it's the perspective with which the therapist treasures their client, even if they don't agree with them or don't, necessarily wouldn't have the same life choices. There is still a sense that they can prize them and they can appreciate that, like what has led them to those decisions, what has led those clients to those decisions, and can have compassion on them. Um,
Yeah.
and I remember reading that, and I was like, "Wow, that's literally how God feels about His people." It's
Mm.
it's right there where it's like He has this like really compassionate view on us, and He has this prizing of us, this treasuring. Like that's the term that's used, is this idea of prizing the client, and I love that because I
Mm.
love the idea that God prizes His people, and it's so true when we see the scriptures where it's like you are a treasured possession, like it's right there. And
Mm.
yeah, and it's not necessarily that, God's people was a treasured possession that did everything right all the time. They actually did quite a lot wrong, but he could appreciate why they made mistakes, or why they sinned, or what led them to their decisions, and could always like hold them in a compassionate sort of that makes sense context. And I think that really, like, so there's like the way UPR applies, which is that it reflects something of the character of God, which I think is really powerful for people to think about. But then there's also a way in which we can hold ourselves as well. I think, at least I know for me, like I've definitely in the past found it hard to appreciate what has led me to bad decision making, or what has led me to sin.
Mm.
In those moments, I've just been like, well, why did I do that? And I have a very critical lens of myself. But when I consider unconditional positive regard, or this idea of prizing myself and prizing like the fact that, there are certain things that led me to those moments, and having a compassionate lens, it allows me to interact with myself a bit more softly, but also allows me to like go through actual change that I want to see. I don't want to keep making these decisions that go against like what I think God wants for me, or what I think the spirit is calling me to do. But it's funny how like it tends to be that the only way like to change those things is through this compassionate lens, this unconditional positive
Hmm.
regard, this agape of yourself. I think from God's perspective, I don't think it's something that's like self-generated, but it's like from understanding that God has compassion on me, therefore I can have compassion on me. Like
Yeah.
if the King of Kings can look at my situation and look at my mistakes and go, I can totally understand how you got there. I can totally appreciate the grief that led you there, the pain that led you there. Then I can appreciate the grief that led me there and the pain that led me there. And so I love how those two things sort of came out for me in UPR, like the character of God, but also how
Mm.
can I apply that to my own like self-regard, I suppose.
I love I think you just cracked something open so important, and that is the difference between earthly self-worth and the worth that we're called to stand in as God's creation, right? Like I
Mm.
had a client once call it plastic fantastic. That's this earthly sense of rah, rah, I'm so great. I deserve to be treated like this, X, Y, and Z, and I deserve to go get my nails done and have a chocolate bar. I don't know, right? Like all these very earthly, worldly perspectives of
Mhm.
self care, which is such a buzzword right now, especially in a psychological lens. I don't think it's a buzzword for actual therapists. I think it's a buzzword for people who are trying to make sense out of psychological themes, right?
Yeah.
Because to me, self care means exactly what you just said. It doesn't mean this rah, rah self worth that's predicated on something very thin. I am inherently worthy because I just am, because I say so, right?
Hmm.
I think this self care is predicated on I was created by the most holy being in the cosmos, and he values me. So I humbly accept the worth that he has given me, not because of who I am, but because of who created me, right? And out of that humbled sense of worth, we can then hold boundaries and say, You're not allowed to treat me that way. You're not allowed to talk to me that way. Or I need to say no to this so that I can get enough sleep. Or go move my body more or eat effectively or, practice self-care in that way, but not this self-care of, I'm so great because I think, therefore I am so great. And so I deserve to be treated a certain way by you. No, it's a very humbled, lowly state to say, I've done nothing to deserve this.
Hmm.
Yet I've been given it, and I stand in the reality of that worth as I ask you to recognize that as well, right? And I think you're right. That is where this unconditional positive regard comes from for self.
Hmm.
Not this plastic fantastic, I'm so great, rah, rah, but this who am I to be loved by the creator of all, yet I am, and therefore I need to steward that well and righteously. And also that it's through that grace that we've been given that we don't deserve, that we can then say, I have unconditional positive regard for you, right? Also,
Mhm.
someone equally undeserving, but equally given that worth in God's
Mhm.
image. And therefore, I will respect you and I will treat you with unconditional positive regard, not because of who you are or what you've done, but because
Mm.
I know your creator and I know how much he values you. And therefore, I
Mhm.
have this space that I will hold for you that is
Yeah.
unconditional positive regard.
Yeah, and I think what's so interesting about, like, creating that space is that okay, I'm gonna try and say because it's, like, just coming to me as you were speaking, but, I think that, um, without being in touch with unconditional positive self-regard, like, for yourself and, like, with God, it is actually really difficult to offer it to others.
Mhm.
Like you know, speaking to that really true sort of, um like the humility, the gift, the accepting of the gift of God's perspective of us, his prizing of us, and not being something earned or deserved, but a gift that was given. I think that lens does allow you to have unconditional positive regard for others because then you're not holding yourself in a position over and you're not holding them in a position over you, like neither is like inferior or superior, it's just two humans meeting one another on the same plane. And so I think it allows like the therapist in the therapy room, but I think also like person to person relationship, it allows you to go, okay, I am just as capable of like messing up as this person has, you know, said that they've messed up. Or, you know, I'm thinking about, for example, like if someone was to confess sin to you or something,
Mhm.
and maybe the temptation to judge in that moment or the temptation to feel puffed up, and how actually when we're in touch with unconditional positive regard for ourselves, we're then in touch with it for others because we're able to see we're both capable of falling short and we've both been given this gift, and so we can both view
Yeah.
ourselves through the lens of love that is agape love. Like it actually creates that avenue rather than um yeah, it creates that avenue.
Yeah, I think you're so right, and what I love about, like, the picture that you're painting is that unconditional positive regard is not fueled by goodwill toward others. I mean, I think
Mm.
that's a part of it, but it's not fueled by this, "I hope good things for you," or "I like you because you like the same things I do," or right? It's fueled by something so much deeper, and then what I hear you saying is it's fueled by humility,
Mhm.
knowing where you stand before God, deserving of nothing but given everything. And from that humility, worth, standing in your own God given worth and recognizing the other person's God given worth. And then I would add to that this sense of, right, because unconditional positive regard is like this peaceful, calm space. There is no, I remember learning about unconditional positive regard in school where, that is the therapeutic factor that makes a difference in therapy, right? Because as therapists, we have no answers to give. I can't like look in my index of life answers for a problem someone's having and say, hold on, that's on page 152. Let me get right back to that. You know, like we just don't have an index of answers for all of life's problems. What we do have is training in being with people.
Mm.
That's how I would define unconditional positive regard. Just learning to be in other people's presence without this frantic need to fix it. And I honestly think this is the difference between a really great friend and a therapist, because a really great friend feels that tension of, I love you, I care about you, and I want to fix it for you. So let me get enmeshed with you and take too much on my
Mm.
shoulders and try to make it better for you.
Mm.
And I still appreciate the heart in which that comes from. I'm not knocking best friends or friends trying to be there for each other, right? But what I'm saying that what we've been taught as therapists is how to not rush to the fixing and how to
Mm.
just see people in the pain. And really, what that involves is feeling uncomfortable with the tension, right? Being comfortable with the discomfort of other people's pain, of their tears, of their tension, not trying to take it away, but being comfortable sitting with them in it.
Mhm. Wow. Yeah, I think that's such a true, like, factor of this where it's like, it actually does not it's like, it's actually really absent of the fixing element, which is so funny because I do think, like, for a lot of people, like, if they want to love people, that so often comes out through wanting to help. What can I do? Like how can I help? That's so
Yeah.
often our first response when our loved ones are suffering. And that is loving, and it is, that is a good thing to offer. But I think the unconditional positive regard, as you said, it's this sort of bearing bearing the pain with them, and yeah, just having compassion, I suppose, for the where they're at. And yeah, exactly, like being really in it and not trying to speed it up, like speed up the process by any like attempt to fix. It's like, I'm just gonna be with you in this for as long as it takes. And that's
Yeah.
hard. But that's so
Yeah.
God.
That's
That's so
so
God.
God. Yes, it is of God, right? To not, well, first of all, I think it's of God not to freak out in the tension, in our sadness, in our fear, in our grief, right? We never see God rattled by any of that. I do think we see him grieved by our grief. And I think that's really appropriate as therapists, certainly as Christians, when we're helping people who are in such a difficult space. That's how I learned about unconditional positive regard is a lot of it is just reflecting, right? Like saying like,
Mm,
wow, I have no answers for you, but I really feel so deeply about this, right? I feel protective over you in this. I feel
mhm.
angry on your behalf. I feel so grieved that you are grieved. And I feel so helpless that I can't take this pain away for you, even though I want to, right? Like that is a great example, I think, of unconditional positive regard because
Yeah.
you're reflecting what you feel in response to what they're going through, but you're not diving in and trying to take it away in a power that you just don't possess, right? If
Mm,
God doesn't even do that, messes with our free will, gets involved and, shakes things up like that, who are we as humans? Like we have absolutely no power to do that. So, but I do think God reflects to us a lot what he's feeling in our pain, in our grief, even in our wandering, right? So I think that's a big part of unconditional positive regard is we have to be really in touch with our own feelings and what's
mhm.
going on in our own heart so that we not just recognize what's happening with them, but then we can explain to them what's happening in us in response to what's happening with them.
Yeah. And I think that's so powerful to offer someone because it does kind of um bring it. I suppose it allows, them the opportunity to maybe not feel as alone in what they're going through, but even just to be seen, to be recognized in their pain, I think is really powerful. And I think almost to honor like the idea that I have, this isn't an easy fix. There is
Right.
an honor in that of like, wow, what you're going through cannot be easily fixed. I don't have a solution to offer you. Um, and I think that shows like a sense of like almost like reverence for what someone's going through, like it's like,
Yes.
okay, yeah, this can't be fixed by my strategies that I come up with on the spot. I'm just going to be in it and say this is tough, and I'm seeing that it's tough, and I'm feeling that it's tough, you know.
And isn't that I don't know, I would describe that a lot of my clients, that's really what they want,
Yeah.
is they wanna be seen in their pain and they wanna be known in it. They don't wanna fix. And I can't tell you how many times I've gone to the fix mode with clients
Mm.
and it has not gone well, right? They've pushed back, they've disagreed, it's broken some sense of connection between us because I'm like, "Hey, I think I know what could help you. Go do this, go do that." And they're like, "No, that's not the answer. That's not what I want from you, right?" And
Mm.
I overstepped because really what people come to therapy for, and I think what people go to their friends and community for is unconditional positive regard, to be seen in it, to be not alone in it, right? It's not necessarily to get answers. And that's kind of our motto, I remember learning as therapists, is the client, especially from a humanistic perspective, right? The client has all the answers that they need. Only they can figure out the answer. I have no answers for them. But what I can offer them is companionship as they figure out the answer as we figure it out together. I can offer them companionship on this journey and reflect back to them not only what I'm feeling in response to what they're going through, but also reflect back to them their values and beliefs and morals as they
Mhm.
navigate toward the answer that they're searching for. So I think that's so powerful that, that really is what people are looking for in their pain, is not the
Mm.
answers. Even though that sometimes is the first thing we try to go to, they're really looking for this unconditional positive regard, even though they don't know how to ask for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm thinking about our instinct to offer the fixing. And so often that is more for our own peace
So
than
true.
actually for the person that we're talking to. Like it's for our own sense of like, okay, if I can do something about it, then this won't feel as uncomfortable anymore, or like, and it won't impact my it won't rattle me as much because I love that you said that God is not easily rattled. I think unfortunately humanity is like I think we do tend to be quite rattled.
Mm,
I know I can be. And
mhm.
that can I have seen that be my first point of call where I have like been like, okay, I just need to do everything I can to help this friend because then this whole suffering will end and that's gonna be great for me, but also it's gonna be great for her. And,
Right.
like, and how that just, like, did not work because it wasn't for my friend. There was a bit of, like
Mhm.
there was a little bit of, like, selfishness in there,
Yeah.
there was a little bit of, like, I don't wanna sleep with this at night, I don't wanna be bothered by this,
Right.
and I think that's so human, I think we all we
Yeah.
all want peace. That's.
Yeah, good
Um,
point.
but I think there is like that like little element of it that sometimes feeds in and we're not often I don't know if we're aware of it.
Yeah, I really I wish I could convey this, like, even more powerfully than these words are, allowing me to, but truly, I say this all the time, some, form of this, that as a therapist, I have not been given answers that someone else doesn't have, that a layperson doesn't have, that your average Joe Christian doesn't have. What I have been given is the opportunity to walk with people in pain and not fix it. Like that is what I
Mhm.
have learned to do, is embrace the discomfort, embrace the tension
Yeah,
without having to fix it. But how did we learn to do that, Georgia, do you think, as therapists? How do we do that?
that's a good question. I was gonna say like yeah, this is the most important thing to convey because I would say it's like the number one thing I learned
Yeah.
in therapy. Is the one thing they told me. It was like you don't know. You don't
Yeah.
pretend you know. You don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy.
As soon as
We went to school, spent thousands and thousands of dollars or pounds to learn the answers, and we left with no answers, but with this really key tool that was like, "Hey, you have no answers. You will never have all the answers, but this one key tool will get you through having no answers ever."
Yeah, yeah, as soon as you think you have answers, that's when you've gone
You
astray.
don't.
That's
Yeah.
I can go back
Yeah,
to the hooks.
exactly. Yeah.
Um, okay, how did we learn though? I think I think it takes practice, like,
Yeah.
primarily. I think it's a lot of mistakes along the way. Like, I think even of, like, my practice in this past week, I left my practice and I was like, I veered too much on the side of answers. I shouldn't have
Mm.
done that. I should,
It
and I think
happens, yeah.
that was my own sort of like that was my own stuff coming up where I was like, I'm finding it hard to be in this
In
unknown,
this tension, yeah.
yeah, and I think so yeah, I think mistakes is a very primary way to sort of see it in action, unfortunately. It's
Yeah.
kind of like it's a bit of practice. Um I think hmm
I think that's a great point, that people,
yeah.
even if they're committed to trying to practice unconditional positive regard, they're not going to perfect it every time. Even two therapists who have been trained in this and
Yeah.
have practiced it still mess it up sometimes. So I think that's a good thing to convey to listeners, that, hey, you can commit to this and still mess it up, right? So
Mhm.
this is a lifelong journey of learning to be a Jesus level of unconditional positive regard.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, you'll make mistakes. And like it's so funny because I think as soon as you start learning about it, you start then, at least for me, I started thinking about all the ways I hadn't hadn't done it in my friendships. I was like, wow, I've been such a
Mm,
solution oriented friend.
yeah.
And with all the best will in the world, but still wanting to fix. But yeah, so I think the more you sort of tune into it, the more sensitive you'll be to the mistakes of it, I think. Like, and there's
Yeah.
goodness in that where it's like you'll just pick it up. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think though. Yeah, do you have anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think what it requires to practice
Mm.
unconditional positive regard, for me at least, is surrender. And I think whenever I think of surrender, I always think of grief. It starts with grief, right? So I remember in grad school, we had, like I said, I got to go to a faith-based um, program for my grad school experience. And so my professors were people of faith. All the people in my cohort were people of faith. And so it was this really tender time, vulnerable time where we could just ask questions, sort of like a little kid would ask their parents, like, Dad, what is it like when this happens? Right. And so I remember asking our professors, like, what happens if you just don't like one of your clients? Like, what does that what happens with that? And I remember one of my professors saying, I get that question. But I just don't think you're going to struggle with that as much as you think you are, because the truth is that those are your clients, and there is sort of this love, this agape love, this unconditional positive regard that you will feel for them. Now, that doesn't mean that you will jive with every single client exactly the same way, but it is true, even for those more difficult clients that I've had, there is this sense of deep love and goodwill and unconditional positive regard that I feel for them. I want the best for them because I love them, because they are my clients and I've walked with them
Mm.
through such tender parts of their life. And so I think in the same way, it has to be fueled by this deep love for people. But I think one of the hardest things for us as therapists is we really do have to surrender. We really do love those people. And sometimes that means we want to cross over into helping control their life to
Mhm.
make their life better, right? Like we think we know the answers of
Right.
things that could help them. And if only they would follow our instruction, their life might be better. And that might make them feel better and us feel better as someone who cares about them. So it really comes from this altruistic place. But we have learned, like that practice that you're talking about, is we have learned that, first of all, that doesn't work very well. But second of all, we can't control people. All
Mm.
the unconditional positive regard in the world, all the goodwill, all the agape love toward people that we can give out cannot make us give them the answers and make them follow it. And so I think there is this big grief in being a therapist, and certainly loving other people that you can't control, that they do have free will to live their life however they want to. And they are affected by brokenness just as much as you are. And they might veer from your path for them, but also God's
Mhm.
path for them. And that might
Mhm.
lead them to even more pain, which will grieve them and grieve you. But sort of this surrender of, I have no control over that, but I do have control over loving you anyway, over still being here when you're ready to come back into relationship with me.
Mhm. Yeah, that's like one of the hardest things, but I think you're right. I think it's like that's such an important foundation to UPR, unconditional positive regard. I'm just going to go
Yeah.
UPR now. But
UPR, yeah.
that's such a foundation to UPR because how control is not it's not really like an aspect of love, like even from altruistic like desire to help, desire to offer answers, and answers that probably may lead them down a path that is beneficial to them. Like control is never an aspect of like UPR or agape love.
Yeah.
And that surrender is so foundational to that. And it actually brought to mind to me like a component which kind of feels very similar to surrender, but it was just the word that came to mind. But trust, like
Mm,
trusting the other person, but also trusting God. I think trusting
yeah.
like God's, but then I think, yeah, surrender and trust feel so, it's like trying to separate bone and
Yeah.
marrow, isn't it? But
Totally.
they're so intertwined. But it is like trusting that even if they're not following what they're not doing what you think they should be doing, that God is still like deeply involved in their story and in their lives, and is
Hmm.
involved in all decisions they make, and is using everything to work things out, and to whatever that work things out means. I don't mean the traditional term of work things out. Who knows how
Yeah.
God works,
Yeah.
but there's that sense of he continues to be in that person's life in such an active way, sort of regardless of the decisions they make. But yeah, I think also trust in the person. Like this is something that I was thinking about recently, just with my practice of care, like trying to reorient my desire to care. Like right now, I think my desire to care does go instinctively towards this, like, okay, care means I need to fix, but
Mm.
trying to reorient it to care means I can trust. Like, if I care for them, I can
Mm.
trust them. I can trust where they're going. I can trust that, as you said, like that foundation idea of the client has all the resources within them, and the therapist is kind of like pointing out those resources along the way, sort of
Mhm.
going, "Oh, there's one." Um,
Mhm.
it is that trust of like they have the resources, and through our relationship, maybe they've gathered attention of those, but like regardless, like God will like be with them, and
Yeah.
they have the resources along the way. So yeah, I feel like, but trust and surrender, they're so similar that it's like kind of talking about the
Yeah.
same thing.
That's true. I usually don't think of trust with surrender, but that is essentially what surrender is. Trusting, yes, the person, but I also think mostly trusting God that he will call out the resources within them or help those
Mhm,
the buds of those resources within that client grow to be able to be a full-blown characteristic that they can then use to, find the answer or to help themselves. But yeah, when I think of surrender, it is like one big trust exercise with God, because that's what I picture is literally placing my client or my child, my husband, my friend, whatever, person I'm trying to surrender to God, that I'm trying not to have control over. I literally envision that I am placing them in God's hand. So I'm relinquishing my control over them by entrusting them to a being that is much more powerful than I am, and to a being that loves them even more than I do. And so I
mhm,
think you're so right. I'm so glad you highlighted that, because especially as Christian therapists who are Christians, right? Like that is how we do unconditional positive regard.
mhm,
We have to grieve that we don't have control, that this person is hurt. We have to surrender them. But to surrender, we must trust that
mhm,
God loves them more than we do, that He will walk alongside them in a way that is perfect that we just can't, right? And then when we engage in that act of grief, trust, and surrender, then we can be freed up to just be a safe space to offer that unconditional positive regard. Then there's nothing on our shoulders, any burden on our shoulders that says, you must fix this. You must show
mhm,
them your love for them by taking this pain away, or you must be their savior, right? We are freed up to be exactly what our role is. I have no answers. I am standing rooted in my worth and recognizing the worth you inherently have. And I'm just offering you space and presence as you work through this with God, right? Like, I think
mhm,
that is what therapy is, at least from my perspective as a therapist who is a Christian. And I think that people who are not therapists can absolutely offer this to your friends and loved ones without going through a master's
mhm,
program, without getting a license in
mhm,
therapy. You can practice the art of grieving, surrendering, trusting God enough to entrust your loved ones in God's hands, and then be freed up to just be God's vessel walking alongside of your friend or loved one, or your child, your spouse, offering them presence and companionship as God leads them on their path
mhm.
of refinement.
Just this idea of like trust and surrender, and like really trusting that, God is walking your child, your spouse, your friends, your clients, if you're a therapist, like along the path of life, like He is right beside them. It makes me, the question that comes to mind is, I suppose, for particularly those who are faithful, who are Christians and have relationships with other Christians. Um, I wonder if this, at least for me, this I wonder if it kind of, what's the word? I think I have like a little voice in the back of my head that goes, what about being your sister's keeper or your brother's keeper? What about,
Mm,
helping someone flee from sin? There's that idea, which I
yeah.
think in our church culture, that was so huge, where it's like, if, um to call out others' sin, to like,
Yeah.
help them flee and all this kind of stuff. And I think that kind of anxiety of not doing the right thing, of like, oh my gosh, but if I'm just like trusting and surrendering, like, am I just allowing my brothers and sisters to like, you know, go crazy? And like, what if I see them sin? I just, what am I doing? I don't know if that's like,
Hmm.
if I'm quite conveying the question, but I think I
Yep.
wonder about that for people who are in Christian circles and maybe also have that worry or anxiety in the back of their mind when it comes to this idea of like really trusting and having UPR. Like, does it feel like that counteracts that idea? I don't think it does,
Uh,
but I can wonder about if people feel
yeah.
that.
I'm so glad you asked that question because I think in therapy and in our Christian faith, unconditional and positive regard, compassion, love can feel like it takes away from challenge, right? But I learned in school, if I don't challenge my clients, right? If I'm too challenging, they're not going to want to come see me. They're not going to feel loved and cared for. So I have to pick my battles with my clients, just like we do with our children and our friends and our spouses and all those other relationships. But I learned that if I don't challenge my clients from time to time, I'm not doing right by them. I'm not doing my job because that is my job. I have a different perspective than they have. And if I don't offer them my perspective from time to time, even in a challenge, I am not loving them well. Now, that
Mm.
doesn't mean that I'm against them and I'm pushing against everything that they do and say, but I have to balance unconditional positive regard and that being your brother or your sister's keeper in a Christian context. I would argue that you can't be an effective keeper for your brother or sister in the faith unless you have unconditional positive regard, especially the surrender aspect. Because
Mhm.
if you don't have that, then you are no longer your brother or your sister's keeper. You are their master, or you're striving to be their master, or you're trying to control, right? Like you must engage in this behavioral compliance for me to feel okay enough about your faith. That is so overstepping our role as a therapist, as a friend, as a brother or sister in the faith. Instead, if we go through this process of internal self-work so that we can get our place to this surrendered, rooted state of unconditional positive regard or agape love, then we are freed up to say, brother, sister, friend, I think there's some discrepancy here in your life and your doctrine. I'm telling you this not because I want to challenge you, but because I love you too much to not say anything. And then we surrender that, right? We grieve that we don't have control to make them, behaviorally compliant or not. We surrender their own refinement between them and God, and we pray and we walk alongside of them as they engage in that process of refinement. If we don't do that, then we end up going where we went in the past, where we try to overstep and control people's relationship with God. So I think being an effective brother or sister's keeper in the faith must be accompanied by agape love or unconditional positive regard.
Mhm. It's that kind of messy middle, isn't it?
Exactly. It's the balance, the
That
holding those two
tension.
in tension. Yep,
Totally.
exactly.
Yeah. And I think I appreciate what you're saying because I think it does what it brings up for me is wow, moments like that when you are getting nervous of like, "Oh my gosh, I'm not saying anything. Do I need to say something? How do I be UPR and also, have this challenge?" It makes me think how much prayer is so, and I feel like with challenge in general, like people talk about like, "Oh, you should pray before you challenge someone or whatever." But I'm like, "No, this is so clearly, like, necessary," because it's like
Yeah.
because you wanna interrogate, like, is this you wanna invite God's interrogation of, like, is this coming from
Mm,
a place of love? Is this coming from a place of UPR, of prizing my brother or my sister?
mm,
Or is it coming from this place of wanting to master them? And I think really
right.
having that time to sit with God and allow him to expose or to reveal, like, just to see what is happening in your heart for you in regard to if that is a conversation, I think is really like, it helps me see, like, that is so important for those moments. But yeah, I'm so with you. I feel like those things can be equally held. It's probably hard. It is hard. But, like, we see that with, like, climb work with God and his relationship with his people.
Yeah, it is hard. And one of those answers is fueled and one is fueled. Our
Yeah.
fear fueled response is I want to control you because I feel so uncomfortable with the way that your life is going. And I think that comes from our love for people, right? Like I want you to be in behavioral compliance with the Bible
Mm.
because I care
Mhm.
for you and I care for God.
Mm.
And I think I can appreciate the heart in which that comes from, but that is not enough. We have to say I care about you and I want you to be in right standing with God and his standards because I care about you and I care about God and he cares about you. But ultimately, I surrender to the fact that I have no power here. I have no answers. I have no power. And I'm going to put this challenge out there and then I'm going to leave it to you and God. And I'm going to be here
Mhm.
with you as you navigate this, right? Like that is
Mm.
the role of a therapist. And that is the role of a brother or sister in the faith, right? But they can look similar on the surface, are,
Mhm.
I'm going to do this to master you versus I'm going to do this to love you well.
Yeah.
They can look very or to prize you, I think is the word you used, right? They look similar on the surface maybe, but they're very different on a heart level. And so you're right. I love the term you used. We have to invite God's interrogation to make sure that we're doing this in the spirit of unconditional positive regard or agape love, not in the spirit of fear or, and
Mhm.
therefore control. So yeah, the words might be very similar, but the heart in which we go about it is very different. And that's what's so difficult about it, because as humans, it's a lot easier to adopt a way of speaking or memorize a
Right.
script to say to our friend or our child or our loved one. It's a lot harder to engage in the process of internal wrestling with God, to engage in the process of refinement ourselves so that we can more embody agape love with our friends and loved ones. But that is the process that we're called to as Christians
Yeah.
and as therapists.
And it's the more powerful process rather than behavior modification. It's the thing that is to actually work with your heart. Um, it's so much more like, yeah, powerful and like sincerely impactful. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's one that invites our own personal refinement journey too, which is
Yeah.
like a right win-win. We get to help someone in their personal refinement, but we get to be personally refined in the process as well, because we are engaging in that wrestle refinement process. I read recently, and let's end with this. I read recently that the mercy of God is his presence, right? Like that is his
Wow.
mercy, is that he is near to us. Isn't that amazing, right? Like,
That's so good.
I know. I'm going to chew on that for like the next
Yeah.
several months.
I'm gonna
But
write
the
that down.
mercy of God is his nearness. It is his presence. And I think that that's what we're talking about here. When we engage in that internal process, we have to get nearer to God to better understand his love in order to mirror it for other people. And so we have
Mhm.
such a gift in that, such a mercy in that, that yes, it takes a lot of time and intention and effort to engage in this refinement process in order to challenge or sit in the discomfort with our friend or loved one. But it is such a mercy because we get to experience nearness to God when we do so. And it's the exact thing that we are offering to our friends and loved ones when we say, I have no answers for you. I can't
Mhm.
take this pain away. I have no power here, but I can offer you my nearness and my confidence in God's nearness, as you might be questioning that right now. And that is the mercy. That is the gift.